Hi Hugo, long time no speak. Hope you're doing well. Today's the 28th of January 2023. Last month I went to visit you in Japan and we had a beautiful time. We did your birthday together and then we did Christmas as well. And we went to Coco's, your favourite restaurant. And we had Pizza Hut and we had KFC and we had lots of snow fights and you covered my shoes loads with snow and made them wet and laugh lots. We got a bed and we built the bed for you and put that in your room with new cover and a new mattress thing. And then we also got the curtains and we got the carpet and the bed's got a nice light, so that's nice. And then we did Christmas in my apartment and that was really nice as well. We just had lots of fun and I was very thankful that I got to spend that time with you. So today's a Saturday, and I'm recording this video because I haven't done one for a while, but also because uh, I should have been talking to you this morning, but I couldn't. I was there, I was ready, and I'll always be there on a Saturday morning, or in your case, a Saturday afternoon. Um, but Okar's decided that she doesn't want you to speak to me every week now, I feel that you should have been given the choice, and it's sad for you that you don't have that choice. And I'm sorry for you that you're in this position because it's not your fault and you haven't done anything. And parents should always let their kids be free. And so, I'll always be here for you and always be to support you. So instead of doing a video call with you today, I just thought maybe we could do some reading and carry on with Matilda. It's taken me a while to get through this. I'm sorry. I've been really busy. But yeah, if we carry on with this, and then I look forward to seeing you next weekend. And I think we might end up getting a new computer game as well. But you'll have to wait until next week to see what that might be. Okay, well, let's get started. Okay. So we were on page 160. I'm just finding it now. Got a nice new bed cover here. It's like a fluffy one, so it keeps nice and warm. Teddy bear fleece, and I think you've got a bed cover similar now. So hold on a minute, where are we? Not page 160, page 164. So this page is called, this chapter is called The Second Miracle. Matilda did not join the rush to get out of the classroom. After the other children had all disappeared, she remained at her desk, quiet and thoughtful. She knew she had to tell somebody about what had happened with the glass. She couldn't possibly keep a gigantic secret like that bottled up inside her. What she needed was just one person, one wise and sympathetic grown-up, who could help her to understand the meaning of this extraordinary happening. Neither her mother nor her father would be of any use at all. If they believed her story, and it was doubtful they almost certainly would fail to realize what an astounding event it was that had taken place in the classroom that afternoon. On the spur of the moment, Matilda decided that one person she would like to confide in was Miss Honey. Matilda and Miss Honey were now the only two left in the classroom. Miss Honey had seated herself at her table and was rifling through some papers. She looked up and said, "Well, Matilda, aren't you going outside with the others?" Matilda said, "Please, may I talk to you for a moment?" "Of course you may. What's troubling you?" "Something very peculiar has happened to me, Miss Honey." Miss Honey became instantly alert. Ever since the two disastrous meetings she had had recently about Matilda, the first was with the headmistress and the second was with the dreadful Mr. and Mrs. Wormwood, Miss Honey had been thinking a great deal about this child and wondering how she could help her. And now, here was Matilda sitting in the classroom with a curiously exalted look on her face and asking if she could have a private talk. Miss Honey had never seen her looking so wide-eyed and peculiar before. "Yes, Matilda," she said. "Tell me what has happened to you that is so peculiar." "Miss Trunchbull isn't going to expel me, is she?" Matilda asked. "Because it wasn't me who put that creature in her jug of water. I promise you it wasn't." "I know it wasn't you," Miss Honey said. "Am I going to be expelled?" "I think not," Miss Honey said. "The headmistress simply got a little overexcited, that's all." "Good," Matilda said. "But that isn't what I want to talk to you about." "What do you want to talk to me about, Matilda?" "I want to talk to you about the glass of water with the creature in it," Matilda said. "You saw it spilling all over Miss Trunchbull, didn't you?" "I did indeed." "Well, Miss Honey, I didn't touch it. I never went near it. I know you didn't, Miss Honey said. You heard me telling the headmistress that it couldn't possibly have been you. Ah, but it was me, Miss Honey, Matilda said. That's exactly what I want to talk to you about. Miss Honey paused and looked carefully at the child. I don't think I quite follow you, she said. I got so angry at being accused of something I hadn't done that I made it happen. You made what happen, Matilda? I made the glass tip over. I still don't quite understand what you mean, Miss Honey said gently. I did it with my eyes, Matilda said. I was staring at it and wishing it to tip, and then my eyes went all hot and funny, and some sort of power came out of them, and the glass just toppled over. Miss Honey continued to look steadily at Matilda through her steel-rimmed spectacles, and Matilda looked back at her just as steadily. I'm still not following you, Miss Honey said. Do you mean you actually willed the glass to tip over? Yes, Matilda said, with my eyes. Miss Honey was silent for a moment. She did not think Matilda was meaning to tell a lie. It was more likely that she was simply allowing her vivid imagination to run away with her. You mean you were sitting where you are now and you told the glass to topple over and it did? Something like that, Miss Honey, yes. If you did that, then it is just about the greatest miracle a person has ever performed since the time of Jesus. I did it, Miss Honey. It is extraordinary. It is extraordinary, thought Miss Honey, how often small children have flights of fancy like this. She decided to put an end to it as gently as possible. Could you do it again? She asked, not unkindly. I don't know, Matilda said, but I think I might be able to. Miss Honey moved the now empty glass to the middle of the table. Shall I put water in it? She asked, smiling a little. I don't think it matters, Matilda said. Very well then, go ahead and tip it over. It may take some time. Take all the time you want, Miss Honey said. I'm in no hurry. Matilda, sitting in the second row about 10 feet away from Miss Honey, put her elbows on the desk and cupped her face in her hands. And this time she gave the order right at the beginning. Tip, glass, tip, she ordered, but her lips didn't move and she made no sound. She simply shouted the words inside her head, and now she concentrated, the whole of her mind and her brain and her will up into her eyes, and once again, but much more quickly than before, she felt the electricity gathering and the power was beginning to surge and the hotness was coming into the eyeballs. And then the millions of tiny invisible arms with hands on them were shooting out towards the glass, and without making any sound at all, she kept on shouting inside her head for the glass to go over. She saw it wobbled, then it tilted, then it toppled right over and fell with a tinkle on the tabletop, not 12 inches from Miss Honey's folded arms. Miss Honey's mouth dropped open and her eyes stretched so wide you could see the whites all around them. She didn't say a word. She couldn't. The shock of seeing the miracle performed had struck her dumb. She gaped at the glass, leaning well away from it now as though it might be a dangerous thing. Then slowly she lifted her head and looked at Matilda. She saw the child, white in the face, as white as paper, trembling all over. The eyes glazed, staring straight ahead and seeing nothing. The whole face was transfigured, the eyes round and bright, and she was sitting there speechless, quite beautiful in a blaze of silence. Miss Honey waited, trembling a little herself and watching the child as she slowly stirred herself back into consciousness. And then suddenly, click, went her face into a look of almost seraphic calm. I'm all right. She said and smiled. I'm quite all right, Miss Honey, so don't be alarmed. You seem so far away, Miss Honey whispered, awestruck. Oh, I was flying past the stars on silver wings, Matilda said. It was wonderful. Miss Honey was still gazing at the child in absolute wonderment as she thought she were the creation, the beginning of the world, the first morning. It went much quicker this time, Matilda said. It's not possible, Miss Honey was gasping. I don't believe it. I simply don't believe it. She closed her eyes and kept them closed for quite a while, and when she opened again, it seemed as though she had gathered herself together. Would you like to come back and have tea at my cottage? She asked. Oh, I'd love to, Matilda said. Good. Gather up your things and I'll meet you outside in a couple of minutes. You won't tell anyone about this thing that I did, will you, Miss Honey? I wouldn't dream of it, Miss Honey said. The next chapter is Miss Honey's cottage. Miss Honey joined Matilda outside the school gates, and the two of them walked in silence through the village high street. They passed the greengrocer with his window full of apples and oranges, and the butcher with bloody lumps of meat on display and naked chickens hanging up, and the small bank and the grocery store and the electrical store, and then they came out at the other side of the village onto the narrow country road where there were no people any more and very few motor cars. And now that they were alone, Matilda all of a sudden became wildly animated. It seemed as though a valve had burst inside her and a great gush of energy was being released. She trotted beside Miss Honey with her wild little hops, and her fingers flew as if she would scatter them to the four winds, and her words went off like fireworks with terrific speed. It was Miss Honey this and Miss Honey that, and Miss Honey I do honestly feel I could move almost anything in the world, not just tipping over glasses and little things like that. I feel I could move tables and chairs, Miss Honey. Even when people are sitting in the chairs, I think I could push them over. And bigger things too, much bigger things than chairs and tables. I only have to take a moment to get my eyes strong, and then I could push it out. This strongness at anything at all. So, hold on. Grandad's trying to phone me, but I'm going to keep recording. As long as I'm staring at it hard enough, I have to stare at it very hard, Miss Honey, very, very hard. And then I can feel it happening all behind my eyes, and my eyes get hot, just as though they were burning. But I don't mind that in the least. And Miss Honey, calm yourself down, child. Calm yourself down, Miss Honey said. Let us not get ourselves too worked up so early in the proceedings. But you do think it is interesting, don't you, Miss Honey? Oh, it is interesting, all right, Miss Honey said. It is more than interesting, but we must tread very carefully from now on, Matilda. Why must we tread carefully, Miss Honey? Because we are playing with mysterious forces, my child, that we know nothing about. I do not think they are evil. They may be good. They may be even be divine. But whether they are or not, let us handle them carefully. These were wise words from a wise old bird, but Matilda was too steamed up to see it that way. I don't see why we have to be so careful, she said, still hopping about. I am trying to explain to you, Miss Honey said patiently, that we are dealing with the unknown. It is an unexplainable thing. The right word for it is a phenomenon. It's a phenomenon. Am I a phenomenon? Matilda asked. It is quite possible that you are, Miss Honey said, but I'd rather you didn't think about yourself as anything in particular at the moment. What I thought we might do is to explore this phenomenon a little further, just the two of us together, but making sure we take things very carefully all the time. You want me to do some more of it then, Miss Honey? That is what I am tempted to suggest, Miss Honey said cautiously. Goody good, Matilda said. I myself, Miss Honey said, am probably far more bowled over by what you did than you are, and I am trying to find some reasonable explanation. Such as what? Matilda asked. Such as whether or not it's got something to do with the fact that you are quite exceptionally precocious. What exactly does that word mean? Matilda said. A precocious child, Miss Honey said, is one that shows amazing intelligence early on. You are an unbelievably precocious child. Am I really? Matilda asked. Of course you are. You must be aware of that. Look at your reading. Look at your mathematics. I suppose you're right, Matilda said. Miss Honey marvelled at the child's lack of conceit and self-consciousness. I can't help wondering, she said, whether this sudden ability that has come to you of being able to move an object without touching it, whether it might not have something to do with your brain power. You mean there might not be room in my head for all those brains, so something has to push out? That's not quite what I mean, Miss Honey said, smiling. But whatever happens, and I say it again, we must tread carefully from now on. I have not forgotten that strange and distant glimmer on your face after you tipped over the last glass. Do you think doing it could actually hurt me? Is that what you're thinking, Miss Honey? It made you feel pretty peculiar, didn't it? It made me feel lovely, Matilda said. For a moment or two, I was flying past the stars on silver wings. I told you that. And shall I tell you something else, Miss Honey? It was easier the second time, much, much easier. I think it's like anything, the more you practice it, the easier it gets. Miss Honey was walking slowly so that the small child could keep up with her without trotting too fast, and it was very peaceful out there on the narrow road now that the village was behind them. It was one of those golden autumn afternoons, and there were blackberries and splashes of old man's beard in the hedges, and the hawthorn berries were ripening scarlet for the birds when the cold winter came along. There were tall trees here and there on either side, oak and sycamore and ash, and occasionally a sweet chestnut. Miss Honey, wishing to change the subject for the moment, gave the names of all these to Matilda and taught her how to recognize them by the shape of their leaves and the pattern of the bark on their trunks. Matilda took all this in and stored the knowledge away carefully in her mind. They came finally to a gap in the hedge on the left-hand side of the road, where there was a 5-barred gate. This was Miss Honey said, and she opened the gate and led Matilda through and closed it again. They were now, this way. They were now walking along a narrow lane, and there was no more than a rutted cart track. There was a high hedge of hazel on either side, and you could see the clusters of ripe brown nuts in their green jackets. The squirrels would be collecting them all very soon, Miss Honey said, and storing them away carefully for the bleak months ahead. You mean you live down here? Matilda asked. I do, Miss Honey replied, but she said no more. Matilda had never once stopped to think about where Miss Honey might be living. She had always regarded her purely as a teacher, a person who turned up out of nowhere and taught at school and then went away again. Do any of us children, she wondered, ever stop to ask ourselves where our teachers go when school is over for the day? Do we wonder if they live alone, or if they have a mother at home, or a sister, or a husband? Do you live all by yourself, Miss Honey? She said. Yes, Miss Honey said, very much so. They were walking over the deep sun-baked mud tracks of the lane, and you had to watch where you put your feet if you didn't want to twist your ankle. There were a few small birds around in the hazel branches, and that was all. It's just a farm labourer's cottage, Miss Honey said. You mustn't expect too much of it. We're nearly there. They came to a small green gate, half buried in the hedge on the right and almost hidden by the overhanging hazel branches. Miss Honey paused with one hand on the gate and said, There it is. That's where I live. Matilda saw a narrow dirt path leading to a tiny red bricked cottage. The cottage was so small it looked more like a doll's house than a human dwelling. The bricks it was built of were old and crumbly and very pale red. It had a grey slate roof and one small chimney, and there were 2 little windows at the front. Each window was no larger than a sheet of tabloid newspaper, and there was clearly no upstairs to the place. On either side of the path there was a wilderness of nettles and blackberry and thorns and long brown grass. An enormous oak tree stood overshadowed in the cottage. Its massive spreading branches seemed to be unfolding and embracing the tiny buildings, and perhaps hiding it as well from the rest of the world. Miss Honey, with one hand on the gate, which she had not yet opened, turned to Matilda and said, A poet called Dylan Thomas once wrote some lines that I think of every time I walk up this path. Matilda waited, and Miss Honey, in a rather wonderful slow voice, began reciting the poem. Right, I'm going to stop there because my space on my phone is going to run out, so I need to stop and then make another video. I love you. I'll be back soon. Bye.